Listen, it's easy to meme Pastor Maldonado. I mean, the guy crashed under a safety car. But here's the thing. Pastor was fast. Like, scary fast. We just never got to see it long enough before the wreckage piled up. Before he was the patron saint of DNF compilations, Maldonado was a champ in GP2. He won 6 races in 2010 and beat Sergio Perez and Jules Bianchi, 2 guys the F1 world rated like future world champions, all while pulling off some of the slickest racecraft in the junior ladder.
On shot at victory here. He's so much closer. Here he comes. If he throws it at the inside, Maldonado will let him go, but the Venezuelan has got a couple of feet in hand as he squirrels round, and Alvaro Parente is going to be right behind him at the line. Second place behind the winner, Pastor Maldonado. Wow.
That wasn't just oil money, that was talent. I mean, yeah, there was oil money, a lot of it. PDVSA backed him hard. And Williams said, sure, we'll take a check the size of Venezuela's GDP. He became the pay driver, and that label stuck, even after he dropped a bomb on the 2012 Spanish Grand Prix, beating Alonso. On merit, in a Williams, no rain, no chaos, no pit stop roulette, just flat-out brilliance. Then it all unraveled like a cursed Netflix arc. And as funny as it is in hindsight, it really was kind of tragic, because under all that carbon fiber shrapnel, there was a guy who knew how to drive. When the money dried up, so did the chances. Lotus turned to other options, and Pastor faded. He tested for Pirelli, flirted with IndyCar, but nobody wanted to take the risk. He became more meme than man. If there was ever a "you sure he's still an F1 guy," it was Marcus Ericsson. Bland car, bland results, no big headlines. He started with Caterham in 2014. I mean, at that point it was less of an F1 team and more of a rolling advertisement for bankruptcy, but whatever. The car was trash. Like Flintstone's car bad. But Ericsson kept his head down, didn't complain, and actually impressed the engineers of the team with his feedback. He landed at Sauber and quietly became the team's rock. He wasn't flashy, but he finished races, saved tires like a wizard, and held his own against a carousel of teammates. In 2018, Ericsson actually had moments. He scored points in Bahrain from P17 and did tire whisperer magic in Mexico. But he was always the guy right outside the points. Close, competent, F1 didn't notice when he left. But then, he hits IndyCar, and suddenly grows a pair. At Chip Ganassi, he wins in Nashville and then wins the Indy 500. So it seems like Marcus didn't vanish. He just moved to a stage that finally noticed him. Esteban Gutierrez was supposed to be the next big thing for Mexico. Sergio Perez was already rising, but Esteban? He had the clean resume. Telmex money, GP3 champ, Ferrari backing. On paper, he was everything a mid-pack F1 team should want. So, what happened? He debuted with Sauber in 2013, and honestly, it started okay. The car wasn't great, but Esteban had a few moments, including a P7 in Japan where he held off faster cars with some real composure.
Room to spare.
Not bad for a rookie. But Sauber nosedived in 2014, and Esteban went down with a ship. 0 points, 0 momentum. He got booted and quietly slotted into Ferrari's test driver gig, which is basically your final stop in F1, unless your name is Charles Leclerc. Then came Haas in 2016, but Gutierrez was always just out of the points. He had 5 11th place finishes. 5! Meanwhile, Grosjean was bagging points and headlines, and that was it. No big farewell, no final lap message. He became a simulator guy again, did a bit of Formula E, showed up in a few paddocks, but the door never reopened. Still in his 20s, but out of chances. There was a time when Daniil Kvyat looked like the blueprint for Red Bull's future. But in Red Bull's world, one mistake doesn't set you back. It reverses your entire career. Kvyat got into F1 with Toro Rosso at 19. He replaced the retiring Mark Webber at Red Bull after 1 year. The plan was clear. He was supposed to be the next Red Bull star after Vettel. And to be fair, he wasn't terrible. He even beat Ricciardo on points in 2015, 95-92. But then came 2016, the Sochi Grand Prix. Kvyat hit Vettel once, then again.
1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 10 11 12 13 14 15 16 17 18 19 20 21 22 23 24 25 26 27 28 29 30 31 32 33 34 35 36 37 38 39 40 41 42 43 44 45 46 47 48 49 50 51 52 53 54 55 56 57 58 59 60 61 62 63 64 65 66 67 68 69 70 71 72 73 74 75 76 77 78 79 80 81 82 83 84 85 86 87 88 89 90 91 92 93 94 95 96 97 98 99 100 101 102 103 104 105 106 107 108 109 110 111 112 113 114 115 116 117 118 119 120 121 122 123 124 125 126 127 128 129 130 131 132 133 134 135 136 137 138 139 140 141 142 143 144 145 146 147 148 149 150 151 152 153 154 155 156 157
was brutal. 2 hits in one corner.
You came like a torpedo.
Well, it's racing.
I'm racing, but you know, if I keep going the same line, you crash.
Don't keep going.
Yeah, but there was a car on the left also.
And within one race, Red Bull swapped him for Max Verstappen, literally mid-season. Kvyat was demoted back to Toro Rosso. Of course, Verstappen won his very first race in the seat Kvyat just vacated, and that broke something. Kvyat looked like a ghost in the paddock after that. Rumors swirled that Helmut Marko had made the call weeks earlier and was just waiting for an excuse. In Toro Rosso, he was frequently outpaced by Carlos Sainz, and insiders said his confidence was in pieces. In 2017, the axe fell again. After a brief re-promotion, he was dropped entirely in favor of Pierre Gasly and Brendan Hartley. That seemed like the end. To be fair, Kvyat was fighting till the very end. He somehow got back into F1 in 2019, and in Germany 2019 he scored a podium, P3, in a chaotic rain race. But Red Bull had already moved on. Albon, Tsunoda, Hülkenberg, anyone but Kvyat. He tested for Alpine, he dabbled in WEC, even dipped into NASCAR of all things. At 29, he's been linked to the Andretti F1 bid and the rumored high-tech entry, but let's be real. In F1, once the spotlight moves on, it rarely circles back. Kvyat didn't vanish. He was launched into oblivion by the same system that created him. If you've ever heard someone say Robert Kubica could have been world champion, they weren't being sentimental, they were being real, because if fate had played even slightly differently, 2008 might have been his year, not Hamilton's. Kubica came into F1 with BMW Sauber and immediately started punching above his weight. He took pole in Bahrain, won in Canada. By mid-season 2008, he led the World Championship, led it, in a car most people viewed as third best at most. But BMW looked at their balance sheet and pulled development funding on the 08 car to focus on 2009. That basically left Kubica out to dry. He ended that season 4th, and with a huge what if next to his name. And yet, the respect never left. Alonso called him one of the best drivers he'd ever raced against.
Robert for me is probably one of the best friends I have in the paddock.
Massa said Kubica's racecraft was on another level. This was a guy who could duel wheel-to-wheel with anyone and make it look easy.
He's in the top 5 of the best drivers here.
In 2010, Renault picked him up, and again he overachieved with podiums in Australia and Belgium. He was all set to join Ferrari in 2012. A pre-contract was signed. He was supposed to replace Massa. And then, in February 2011, during a local rally in Italy, his Skoda left the road and hit a guardrail at over 100 kilometers per hour. The rail pierced the car and nearly severed his right arm. He spent years in rehab regaining strength and basic function. Doctors told him he'd never race again, but he returned anyway. In 2019, he signed with Williams. And yes, the car was awful, and yes, George Russell outpaced him, but he still scored a point. However, the hand was never the same. He couldn't take high-load corners the way he used to, reflexes weren't as sharp, he became Alfa Romeo's reserve, drove in DTM and World Endurance Championship with no luck, and still occasionally tests, but the dream is over. Not because of age, not because of talent, just because of one freak crash that stole his prime. Antonio Giovinazzi wasn't just another F1 rookie, he was the Italian hope. Ferrari-backed, handsome, fast in junior formulas, and carrying the weight of an entire nation that hadn't seen a homegrown star since Fisichella or Trulli. And yet, in the blink of an eye, he disappeared from Formula 1. Giovinazzi was talented as a junior. He came second in GP2 in 2016, beating Pierre Gasly straight up. Ferrari saw enough to slap him into a reserve role, and when Wehrlein injured his back before the 2017 season opener, Giovinazzi stepped into the Sauber and immediately impressed in Australia. But China came next, and he binned it. Twice. In the same weekend.
Bottom 6, Giovanati now. We'll see the checkered flag. Oh, Willie!
Let's go to the wall.
That is.
Higher. Oh dear.
Still, Ferrari kept him in the pipeline, and in 2019, he finally got a full-time seat at Alfa Romeo. He was paired with Raikkonen, who at this point was basically a living statue with a steering wheel.
Gloves! Mark, gloves! Steering wheel. Gloves and steering wheel here. Hey! Hey! Steering wheel, somebody tell him to give it to me.
Early on, Giovinazzi had the quali edge. Dude could fly on Saturdays. But Sundays, it all slipped through his fingers. If you're not clearly outperforming your teammate, You're on borrowed time. By 2021, insiders said Ferrari had enough. Gio was dumped for a rookie with Chinese backing. Since then, a rough Formula E stint, a Le Mans win in 2023 that finally gave him a big W,
James Collado and Antonio Giovinazzi are victorious at Le Mans.
but the F1 call never came back. If you only know Heikki Kovalainen as the guy Lewis beat at McLaren, you missed half the story. Because before he became the wingman who vanished, Kovalainen was that dude in the junior ladder. This man beat Nico Rosberg in equal machinery, finished second in the inaugural GP2 season behind only Rosberg himself, and was one of Flavio Briatore's chosen ones. A big deal when you remember Flavio was also managing Alonso himself.
What are the areas you're first going to be looking at? Is it the team structure technically, or the driver, all of it?
I am,
2007, Renault finally gave Kovalainen his shot. It started rough, he binned it in Australia and got roasted by Briatore live on TV, but by mid-season, the Finn hit form. He outscored Fisichella, grabbed a podium in Japan, and suddenly looked like Renault's future. But that was the problem. Alonso was Renault's future too. And when Alonso made his comeback in 2008, Heikki was shuffled to McLaren in what looked like a win for everyone.
What's that? Do it. Do it. Do it. You can do it.
Except it wasn't. He walked into a mess. McLaren was Lewis Hamilton's team, not just in name, but in setup, strategy, engineering, all of it. Kovalainen would later admit that while he had equal equipment on paper, in practice he was constantly second prioritized. His one win in Hungary 2008, a fluke thanks to Felipe Massa's engine blowing 3 laps from the end. Even then, Kovalainen barely managed to stay ahead of Glock. Whispers in the paddock suggested he wasn't aggressive enough in development meetings. Too Finnish in the stoic sense. He was fast, but when you're in the most political team in the paddock, you can't just drive. You have to fight. By 2009, he was out-qualified and outscored again, and McLaren was already talking to Jenson Button, leaving him without a seat. The post-McLaren years? Grim. He joined Lotus, the new green one, not the old glory one, and to his credit, he put in real work. The car was slow, but Kovalainen drove his heart out. He out-qualified Trulli more often than not, and even embarrassed a few midfield cars on Saturdays. But that's where the fairy tale ends. Lotus became Caterham, the midfield never called again, and when Kovalainen finally got a shot to sub in for Raikkonen at Lotus, the good Lotus, in 2013, he flopped. 2 races, 0 points. Since then, he's rebuilt a solid career in Japan. Super GT champion, respected vet, but F1 never gave him the redemption arc. In the end, Kovalainen didn't vanish because he lacked speed. He vanished because he never figured out how to play the game. And before we get into top 3, if you like the video so far, don't forget to subscribe. I'm trying to get to 15,000 subscribers by F1 summer break, and it helps me a lot. Tonio Liuzzi is the textbook case of potential stranded by timing and inconsistency in politics. People forget, he beat Michael Schumacher in karting. He dominated F3000 in 2004, winning 7 out of 10 races. This guy was supposed to be Italy's next F1 star. Then Red Bull happened. In 2005, Red Bull made their grand F1 debut, running 2 rookies, Christian Klein and Tonio, alternating seats. That's right, they literally rotated drivers. It was a chaotic mess, and Tonio, always known for flair over consistency, didn't thrive. 1 point from 4 starts. Then came the demotion to Toro Rosso. That was the first red flag. However, he kind of showed solid results there. Fast laps, a P6 finish in China 2007, but was largely outpaced by a 19-year-old Sebastian Vettel, who joined mid-season after BMW let him go. From then on, Tonio was labeled as the guy before Vettel, which is pretty much the worst legacy you can have. The car was decent. Paul Di Resto was the hot rookie, and Tonio, he just didn't deliver consistently. He had one standout drive in Korea, finishing 6th, but too many DNFs and anonymous Sundays. In 2011, the team dropped him. No warning, just thanks, we're done. The final insult came when he signed with HRT, a team so underfunded drivers had to pay for their own brakes. No joke. The car was a disaster. He outqualified some Indian dude most of the time, but nobody cared. The team was irrelevant, and so was Tonio. Post F1, Tonio moved to GT and endurance racing, occasionally pops up as a steward. I guess talent alone doesn't cut it if you can't adapt. If you only looked at his resume before F1, you'd assume Stoffel Vandoorne was destined for greatness. Formula Renault Euro Cup winner, GP2 champion in 2015, one of the most dominant campaigns in recent memory, 10 wins, record points haul, and most impressively, he destroyed everyone in his rookie season. He was McLaren's next big thing. Back in 2016, when Alonso missed a race due to injury, Vandoorne subbed in on short notice, made Q2, and scored points on debut in Bahrain. But then the full-time seat came in 2017, and everything fell apart. First, the obvious. The car was trash. The Honda-McLaren partnership was imploding. Alonso was publicly torching the engine on team radio.
GP2 engine. GP2.
But even once McLaren switched to Renault engines in 2018, Vandoorne still couldn't get it going. Alonso was dragging the same car into Q3, while Stafle couldn't even touch Q2 some weekends. However, here's where it gets murky. I don't think it was the same car. People inside the team insisted Vandoorne's car was getting different parts, like worse spec'd aero packages, older updates. There are rumors McLaren prioritized Alonso's setup at every race, funneling resources toward their double world champion. And then there's the political angle. McLaren was in a state of civil war. Eric Boullier was out, Zach Brown was in, technical staff were reshuffling constantly, young Lando Norris was rising in the background. The writing was on the wall. Vandoorne was axed after just 2 seasons. No real explanation, just a seat gone. He ended up in Formula E, where he showed his true level again, winning races, grabbing a championship with Mercedes in 2022, and proving he still had that calm, analytical edge that made him so devastating in the junior ladder. Nelson Piquet Jr. wasn't supposed to be a footnote, son of a 3-time world champion, and in the early 2000s, one of the brightest talents in junior racing. Second in GP2 in 2006 behind only Lewis Hamilton. He was quick, strategic, and built for the long haul. Then came Renault. Nelson joined the team in 2008 as Alonso's teammate, a rookie paired with Fernando Alonso in his comeback season. That's not a teammate dynamic, it's a survival test. And to his credit, Piquet had moments. He scored a shock podium in Hockenheim, finishing second after a strategic masterclass on slicks. He nearly scored again in Japan and was regularly handling the car well, despite constant understeer and an evolving chassis. But Alonso was obliterating him in qualifying, and internally, the team was kind of getting impatient for him to perform. 2009 started badly for Nelson. A string of crashes and DNFs, a lack of points, and then, halfway through the season, he was fired. I guess he was upset? So, weeks later, Piquet dropped the biggest scandal F1 had seen since Spygate. He alleged that Renault ordered him to crash at the 2008 Singapore Grand Prix.
On lap 12, Alonso pitted. Just 2 laps later, his teammate Nelson Piquet crashed into the wall. The safety car was deployed, suddenly transforming Alonso's strategy.
It seems to me Alonso's effectively going to be leading the Grand Prix, isn't he?
Fernando inherited the lead and was able to lap quickly in clear air at the front.
Fernando Alonso coming through to take the checkered flag and claim a very, very well-deserved victory.
Alonso won the race. Piquet, who crashed on command, was hung out to dry. Flavio Briatore and Pat Simmons were even banned. Renault as a team narrowly avoided expulsion. However, Alonso managed to somehow walk away clean, like he didn't know nothing. But Nelson, he became toxic. He was a snitch, and his F1 career was over. He tried NASCAR, ran trucks, then jumped into Formula E, where, in true irony, he became the first ever Formula E champion in 2015, quietly, with little fanfare, but with redemption on his own terms. Formula 1 doesn't do second chances unless your name is Albon, or maybe Hulkenberg. One bad season, one internal shakeup. If the timing's off, pack your bags. By the way, who did I forget? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe.